Yosemite is one of the most magnificent natural spectacles on Earth. Located in California's Sierra Nevada mountains, this awe-inspiring force of nature is filled with granite monoliths, towering sequoias, rushing waterfalls, and hundreds of miles of untouched wilderness. It is truly one of the most breathtaking and heavenly destinations you will ever visit, and I truly hope that everyone gets the chance to experience it once in their lifetime. This is Yosemite National Park. So I just visited Yosemite for the very first time about a week and a half ago. After years and years of kind of pining over this beautiful place, my family and I finally planned our very own trip to Yosemite. And let me tell you, it lives up to the hype. 1000%. So if you're new here, my name is Crosby, and for the last 8 months, I've been road tripping through the US off and on with my sister and my boyfriend Dylan. Most recently, I've been on a 3-month USA road trip in a travel trailer. And at the very end of our trip, we went to Yosemite with my family. This really was one of the biggest things that we were looking forward to on our trip. I mean, it's just absolutely incredible. You've seen the photos, you've seen the videos, but the more and more we started planning for it, the more we realized how much went into it. It is an extremely popular park all year round, and you want to make the best of your trip if you're only going for a few days. So I really wanted to make this video for any first-time visitors who are planning a trip to Yosemite to talk about all the things that really helped us plan our amazing trip to Yosemite. So I'll be talking about the planning phase, lodging, must-dos in the park, how to get around in the park. So I'm just so excited for you guys to go to Yosemite because it really was one of the most incredible trips I've ever been on. So I'm gonna shut up now and give you guys all the good stuff about Yosemite National Park. Let's get into it. So first things first, let's talk planning. If you're still choosing what time of year you would like to go to Yosemite, obviously the summertime is usually the most convenient for most travelers. We went in June of 2021 and it was actually really, really hot, hotter than normal for this time of year. It was about 103 as the high, pretty much the whole time we were there. I do realize that after doing some research, that was not a normal temperature, so don't be scared of going in the summer. It obviously is very crowded, but it is Yosemite and that's to be expected. It didn't really take away from the experience because it's still so stunning. But if you do have the flexibility to go in the spring, I would say May is kind of like the peak time to go. That's when the waterfalls are at their peak flow because the snow's just melted. So if you have that flexibility, I'd say, late spring is ideal, but summer is great as well. Winter looks magical as well. So if you're more of a snow person, definitely try that out. Just keep in mind that a lot of the trails and streets might be closed due to the snow. So probably the most important planning tip of all is to go on recreation.gov and check the Yosemite page to see if you need a day use pass. So if you're still traveling in kind of the COVID era, you do need a reserved day pass to get into the park at all. So if you don't have this pass and you show up to the gate with a national parks pass or anything like that, you still cannot get in. You have to reserve a time slot. For example, if you reserve it for June 21st, as of right now, that one pass will last you for 3 consecutive days. So you'll be able to go in from June 21st to June 24th. There was actually a lot of people that were trying to drive into the park and were actually turned away by the park rangers if they didn't have a day pass. And if you do miss your time slot, we did this and we're freaking out because we're like, we've planned this whole trip. We have housing, all the things, and we don't have a day pass to get into the park. So a solution to this is after the passes kind of are sold out in the initial stage, another 1,000 passes, I believe, become available 7 days before the date that you want to go. So we pretty much set an alarm and refreshed the page until the available sign opened up. We went in, got our day pass 7 days before, and everything was fine. So check, a couple months in advance is usually when they go up, and then 7 days before. Another important thing is, like pretty much all national parks, there is an entry fee to get into the park. So for one vehicle, it's $35 unless you have a national parks pass like I do, and then it's free to get in. So a national parks pass is about $90 to $100 with shipping, and it gets you into all of the national parks and a bunch of national monuments and a few state parks all throughout the country for free. So if you're going to more than like 3 parks in a year, I definitely recommend getting a parks pass because it's totally worth your money. Most parks have like a $20 to $40 to $50 entry fees, so just keep that in mind. And lastly, for the planning stage of your trip, make sure that you download your maps offline or buy a physical map before you go into the park. Like many national parks, the cell service is quite spotty, so definitely don't rely on having internet to find your way around. You can actually go to Google Maps and you can download your maps offline. I highly recommend doing that. And for hikes as well, make sure you go to all trails, and if you upgrade to the pro version, you can download the hiking route that way and you can have it offline. So when you don't have internet, you still know where you are. I did notice though, when I was in Yosemite Village, the service is quite good. So if you get into the park and don't have, maps or anything ready, go into the village and, at the lodge area or at the little shopping center where the bikes are, the service was fairly good. All right, so the second thing I'm gonna touch on real quick is lodging. So just a general recommendation that I have is try and stay in the park if you can. Obviously, with it being so popular, it is quite difficult to get a spot at a camping site or at a hotel. So again, try and do this as early as possible so you can get a spot. We actually ended up staying outside of the park because we just could not, we were in RVs, we couldn't get a spot at a campsite. It filled up so quick. So we ended up staying outside of the park at Bass Lakes at Yosemite RV Resort, and it was about 30 minutes from the entrance of the park. And we were I was unaware of this, but it's 30 minutes to the entrance of the park, but once you get to the south entrance, it is about an hour-ish drive to most of the sites that you're gonna wanna see. So from the south entrance to Yosemite Valley, it's about an hour drive. We were driving 3 hours a day when we were visiting, which definitely took a toll by the end of the trip. So, if you can, try and stay in the park. And then if you go to the other entrance on the other side of the park, there's also some Airbnbs and hotels that way. So the main lodging options inside of the park are hotels, cabin rentals, and campsites. For hotels, I would say the Mac Daddy in Yosemite is the Ahwahnee Hotel. It is absolutely stunning and it's super historic. We walked through there when we were visiting. It's kind of like its own little attraction. So if you could stay there, do it. I'm sure it's expensive and hard to do, but that's something that if I go back, I would love to try and stay at the Ahwahnee Hotel because it was so beautiful. And then for camping, the campsites there, if you get to stay in the valley, you really cannot beat that level of views and experience. We biked by a lot of the campsites and we're just drooling. I'm dying to stay at Lower Pines someday. It's like right on the river with the view of all of the granite walls, and it was just beautiful. So you can reserve those on recreation.gov. Again, it's hard, so try and do it as early as possible. All right, so the next thing that I really want to talk about is how to get around the park, specifically Yosemite Valley. I'd say the top recommendation that I would have for first-time visitors is to rent bikes, at least for one day. It is by far the best way to get around the valley. You not only have a stunning ride through the valley, going through the meadows and next to waterfalls and next to all of the giant granite monoliths. It's so easy to get around. You don't have to fight for parking because it is extremely packed, like I was saying. So if you're able to bike, there's lots of bike stands and bike paths all through the valley, and it's very doable for a day to bike through the whole entire park. There's several places you can rent bikes in Yosemite. We rented ours in the Yosemite Village. There's a bike stand there, and it's first come, first serve. I think most of the bikes there are first come, first serve. There's also some options to get them in Curry Village and at the Yosemite Valley Lodge. The other option for getting around the park is the free shuttles. So before your trip, make sure you go online and do a little bit of research to see if they're going right now. When we went, they were not in service because of COVID. So depending on when you go, they may or may not be going. But if they are, it's free. It can get you all around the park, and I definitely would recommend taking the free shuttle over a car just because you won't have to deal with parking and all of that. And then lastly, of course, you can rent a car. What we did was we drove into the park, parked at the Yosemite Village, and then we rented bikes and drove around. It was a lot easier than, parking your car, getting out, taking photos, getting back in the car, driving to the next spot, trying to find parking. I just personally think it's so much easier to either take the shuttle or ride a bike. All right, now for the fun part, the must-dos in Yosemite for first-time visitors. I already kind of touched on this, but if there is one thing that you have to do in Yosemite, it is bike through Yosemite Valley. So like I said, we rented ours from a bike stand in Yosemite Village. We rented ours for about 5 hours, and it was just about the perfect time to explore the park and have time to relax by the rivers and just enjoy the beautiful scenery. It seriously was one of the most magical travel experiences I have ever had. The valley itself is just so incredible. There is all of the things that, you know, is famous about Yosemite, from Yosemite Falls to El Cap to Half Dome and all of those iconic spots. You can see them all in one day on a bike. So in addition to biking through Yosemite Valley, the first thing that you are gonna do if you're coming in the south entrance is you're gonna go through a tunnel. It's called Wawana Tunnel, and it will lead you out to Tunnel View, and you cannot miss it. You literally park your car, you go, and you just get this amazing view of the entire valley. You can basically see like all of the main attractions in Yosemite, so it's kind of hard to tell, but to the left, that is El Capitan, or El Capitan, and then way in the back is Half Dome, and then right over there is Bridal Veil Falls. Now, personally, I am more of a sunrise hiker. I'm very much an early riser, and I very rarely like to hike later in the day because I don't like crowds and heat, but Yosemite has sort of changed my mind. One of the most amazing hikes I've ever done, and it wasn't hard at all, was Taft Point and Sentinel Dome. So you can do both of these points in one hike. They're pretty much like on the same trail, one after the other, about a mile apart. So we started our hike to Taft Point around 4:30 or 5 p.m. It's through some wooded areas. It's very pretty, and then it leads you out onto this gorgeous granite slab, and you kind of walk out to the edge, and it's just a humongous steep drop 3,500 feet above Yosemite Valley. So obviously be careful. There have been people that have slipped off. There's no rails really at all, so make sure that you're being careful, but it's definitely one of the most spectacular views I've ever seen. We even saw people tightroping across a 3,500 drop of this canyon. I mean, it was the coolest thing ever. And right after we kind of, you know, laid on the cliff and looked at the beautiful views for as long as we wanted, we went back down, I want to say about a half a mile, and then you can turn left and you walk about another mile and a half to Sentinel Dome. It's about a mile to the top of Sentinel Dome. It's not a very hard hike until you get to the very end, and it's just quite a steep uphill climb. It's nothing too crazy, but you get to the top, and I know I keep saying this view, definitely better than Taft Point, and I was shocked by Taft Point, but you go to the top of Sentinel Dome, and it is just a 360-degree panoramic view of Yosemite. And I'm not kidding, you can see actually everything in the park, and at sunset, it just makes it so magical. Everything is glowing. All the granite walls are glowing. You can see all the waterfalls, and it's just so amazing. Just make sure that you bring a headlamp or a flashlight for the hike right back down. And the last main thing we did at Yosemite was hike Mist Trail to Vernal Falls. And we were kind of deciding between whether we wanted to do this hike or Upper Yosemite Falls, but after a lot of research and looking at a ton of different reviews, we did notice that Upper Yosemite Falls is very difficult. It's a 7.5 mile trail, a lot of switchbacks, very difficult. So if you're a very experienced hiker, I would recommend doing that. The hike to Vernal Falls, it's difficult, but I saw people of all ages doing it, so from little kids up to elderly adults. This is so steep.
Yes.
It's gonna be worth it though.
Oh yeah.
So you hike about, I wanna say 1.5 miles to 2 miles up to Vernal Falls, and when you get to the top, I mean, it's just spectacular. It's a 317-foot waterfall that just plummets down, and it just opens up into this gorgeous canyon view. It is so amazing, and so it's definitely worth the steep hike up. The very end of the hike is about a 600 flight of stairs, so that's pretty difficult, but once you get to the top, you can relax. We brought a little picnic and set up next to an emerald pool, swam in that, and just enjoyed our time there for a couple hours. And if you're feeling particularly adventurous that day, you can also hike up to Nevada Falls, which is only a mile up from the Emerald Pool. It is much more difficult, so a lot of switchbacks, and it's very steep, but my cousin and my sister did it and just said it was so worth it.
Okay, second half of the hike, everyone else wimped out. So this is Ansley and Lainey takeover. We are hiking up to that waterfall. It's like another 1.2 miles straight up. Bye. Wish us luck.
So I kind of regret not doing it, but whatever, it was hot. Either way, I definitely recommend on the way down, you hike, it's about 0.3 miles to Clark Point, and you pretty much go to that point, and then you can hike a different route down. So instead of going on the paved popular route, you can hike down a less trafficked route on a dirt path, and the views are insane. So I definitely recommend doing that on your way down. It's a little bit longer, a little bit more difficult, but totally worth it in my opinion. And lastly, Mariposa Grove is also a very worthwhile place to visit. It's right near the south entrance of the park, and it pretty much is just a huge, magnificent grove of sequoia trees. The reason we didn't visit when we were there is because, one, we had just come from Sequoia National Park, so we wanted to kind of get a diverse look at everything in California, but also, unfortunately, a lot of the grove was burned in the fires, so you know, it wouldn't have been really the same, and we didn't want to, you know, spend a few hours doing that when we could, you know, be doing something else. But Mariposa Grove is supposed to be just beautiful, so I'd love to see it someday as well. Yosemite does have the second highest death rate of all the national parks, which pretty much just has to do with all of the massive amount of remote wilderness that there is and the super steep cliffs like I was mentioning. So just, you know, be careful, don't do anything dumb, stay on the trails, have maps, don't go too close to the edge, all of those things. Secondly, there's a lot of wilderness in the park, specifically black bears. We actually saw 3 black bears within the first 10 minutes of us biking on our very first day. It was a mom and 2 cubs, and they were right next to the road, which obviously isn't normal. So if you do see any bears when you're at Yosemite, make sure that you are keeping at least a 50-yard distance away from them, just to keep them safe, keep yourself safe, and let a park ranger know so they can, you know, keep the bears safe and kind of are able to track them if they're in an area where they're not supposed to be. And lastly, of course, practice leave no trace. So, you know, when you're in the park, don't take anything from the park, don't leave trash, don't carve your name on anything. There are so many people coming to Yosemite every single year, and it becomes really easy for it to get a little bit tarnished, and we want to protect it as much as we possibly can because it's just such an incredible place. So of course, just practice leave no trace and you'll be good to go. But that is pretty much it for all of my tips for any first-time visitors going to Yosemite. Really, all of this is what we kind of researched that helped us a ton with our planning, and it helped us have just the most incredible trip there. I'm dying to go back because there's seriously so much to do in Yosemite. I've only scratched the surface. So if you've ever been to Yosemite, definitely feel free to comment any recommendations that you have down below. And if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to ask them in the comment section. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to give it a like, share it with your friends and family, and subscribe to my channel. It really, really supports me, and I'm so excited to continue making more of these videos from things that I learned on my USA travels, as well as sharing my future international travels with you all. So thanks again for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!